I'm Simone, and I am the curator of this exhibition. It comes from the head. Thank you so much for being here. And really, after that great introduction from Alex, I'm just going to jump right into the tour. So I will be switching from my laptop camera to a mobile camera, and I'll be walking with you all around the gallery space. So just one moment to switch. Okay. So hi everyone. So we are in the gallery space at the National Art Gallery of the Bahamas together, and we are in the ballroom space of the gallery, and that is on the second floor of the space. The space originally was a colonial plantation home that later was seized by the government after the family left the Bahamas. And now, since the 1980s, it has become our national gallery. And here we're starting with the work of Avery Wright. So here we have three of her works on the screen. And this is a series that really honors the heritage of Avery Wright's legacy of straw vendors and her experiences growing up in the straw market. So Avery has created these portraits, these almost mini altars, mini tributes to her family members. And each face is a cast of a matriarch in her family. And here on each work, you can see some of the aspects that go into straw craft. You can see the pom-poms of raffia that are actually used to embellish straw bags. You can see braided raffia. You can see the fabric that's used in the inside of a lot of straw objects. And of course, you can see the woven plaid itself on this work. You can see a lot of the different styles of plaid. And this is visible from the main entrance of the gallery space. So these three works are called Great Expectations, The Last Button on Abraham's Coat, Three Sisters, Merle Taught Us, and they're all made in 2022. So It Comes from the Head is an exhibition that not only honors artisans, platters, vendors, and heritage keepers that support and maintain straw craft as an art form and industry, but is also inspired by my own relationship to straw work that really emerged from the research that I found that was written by my grandmother in a local archive in the Bahamas. We are now going to move on to the work of Jody Minnis behind me. She is on the eastern side of the gallery, and her work, as you can see, is a three-sectioned structure installation in the gallery. And the red and blue that you see here is a recreation of the actual experience of going into a place called the straw market, where local vendors sell straw work, sell this weaving work, along with other tourist items. And here, Minnis has simplified this structure for the space of the gallery. You see here objects she's been collecting over the years, including a shell cross, plaited straw objects, and my favorite, just little tiny metal policemen that feature throughout her work as she considers the boundaries between consuming tourism and producing it. Here, the blue tarps that you could see are the actual tarps that are used to cover the workspaces of these women, mostly, who are working in these markets and are constantly interacting with tourists. Here, she really is extending her criticism to not only these women's engagement with these thousands of people that come into spaces that are so intimate to them, but she's also engaging with the press that is surrounding tourism. So tourism in the Bahamas, as you can see, tourism in the Bahamas is the number one industry here, and it's used to fund most of the happenings of the country. And since the start of the exhibition, she's been collecting these newspapers, and she plans to increase the number that you see here. So the space is constantly being altered, um, is being edited, and Jody here is playing with the idea that straw vendors are constantly being consumed, and that the spaces created are constantly being consumed. We are now going to move to the western side of the gallery, where you'll find the artwork of Tamika Galanis. So Tamika Galanis's work is a four-part series where she's focusing on a woman named Charlotte, who is found in the archives of Port Ho Cat Island. And Tamika Galanis was working with a team to really recover her from the archive of slavery in the Bahamas. And she was looking at court records, correspondence between planters on the plantation, because Charlotte was one of two women charged in a rebellion in 1831, where the head of the Hunter plantation on Port Ho was attempted to be murdered. Charlotte, unlike many of the men who were accused, was not punished at all. She was allowed to remain in the Hunter plantation, but Charlotte was known to be a woman of great knowledge and power. She had um, an extensive knowledge of the practice of bush medicine, which is the knowledge of local herbs here in the Bahamas, but that is also associated with the practices of Obeah, which is an African religious practice that is local in the Bahamas. Tamika Galanis in these works is actually showing a figure posed on the actual Port Ho plantation where she recovered Charlotte. And the woman posing is Felicia Hunter, who is also a descendant of the people who worked this plantation. So Tamika obscures this woman's face in a mask of plait and four-rowed shell structure on her face. And this woman is posed amidst castor and love vine, which is the vine surrounding her body and obscuring it from view in this image. So love vine is a plant that actually suffocates the organism that it grows on. So the more and more that this person is enveloped in this love vine, it's as if they're being lost to the plantation itself. While the castor that you can see in the image that casts that beautiful shadow among the ruins of the Hunter plantation. Castor might have been one of the medicinal plants that Charlotte herself used, possibly in continuous resistance against the planters on Cat Island, because when it's cooked incorrectly, it is a source of cyanide. And Charlotte, in those records that were recovered from Tamika Galanis's research, was constantly accused of poisoning her masters, her enslavers. With that, I will move to another artist in the exhibition. So this section of the gallery, you can see the bench behind me here, is used to view this work by Nina Major. This work, created in 2021, is called Hand Waves, and it shows Major's process of weaving straw clay. So Anina Major works with the weaving practice of straw by recreating it in clay, and she mixes fiber into that clay mixture and uses it to weave objects that are similar to the straw objects she's been viewing in archives at Harvard, at Yale, and across the northeastern United States. And it's really become a form out process in her practice. And if you look closely on the detail of Major's nails, you can see the actual recreation of a Bahamian waterfront. Um, so she is recreating the environment in full of straw plaiting. So plat, just a little more background information on plat. Plat is harvested from palm fronds, and she's creating the type of environment that references original plat. And Anina's second work in this exhibition is Mother, created in 2023, where you can see her method of plaiting shown on this work. Behind the sculpture is an installation that is attached to the sculpture, and it really creates this beautiful shadow on the wall of the gallery, and it creates a structure for the clay basketry that Anina Major is creating. But here in Mother, Major is using atmospheric firing. So she's creating a intimate process with the clay. The fiber that she uses in the weaving process really changes in atmospheric firing because she is adding found objects to the surface of the kiln that interact not only with this fiber that's expanding differently at this high temperatures, but also with the sea glass, the salt, the sand that she's throwing in there as she is sitting by the kiln while she's firing these objects in clay. And that really is what causes the shifting patterns on the surface of the clay. So in the kiln, the object is allowed to break, it's allowed to change shape. And this is really an integral part of Major's process. She doesn't know what the object is going to look like until it's fired, until it's done with this process. Major is also inspired by the invisible labor of women. She is inspired by female bodily form. She is also inspired by the idea of something that is non-functional. So at the edges of this object, you can see fraying edges. You can see the plait itself being held together at angles that are impossible if actually made out of straw. And Anina Major is creating that tension when you encounter the sculpture, which I find really beautiful in her practice. And as I move to the center of the space, I will just move a little bit slower so that you can see the room. And here, as I move to the southern portion of the space, you can see the wall text here, but to the left of the wall text is an installation that I really wanted to have in the show because originally the object that inspired this entire process is, as I said earlier, a book written by my grandmother, Thelma Eula Cambridge. This book is called Growing Functional Arts in the Bahamas. And although we were not able to have the book in person, there are special restrictions according to the National Archives of the Bahamas. We were able to get a digital copy of the book and have it here on view in the space. So Growing Functional Arts in the Bahamas was written in 1968, and the book really focuses on the preservation of straw craft. So it's detailed, it's handwritten analysis on each practical aspect of straw craft, but it also it also advocates for the education of the work and straw as a foundational aesthetic practice in Bahamian culture. This book itself was actually lost not only to my family, but after founding this book, it wasn't on anyone's radar. I had found multiple volumes of accounts of straw written by people as early as the 90s. But this book was written in 1968, and so far it's the earliest account of straw that I've been able to find in the archival record. And I really wanted to honor this book in the space itself. So there's a quote here that says, interviewing straw vendors at Rawson Square, I asked about 50 people this question: where do you get your patterns or designs? The answer, 9 out of 10, was this: it comes from the head. And that is where the name of the show comes from. It comes from the head, a straw heritage, because she was able to see that talent, that ingenuity while she was creating this book. Here, I'll also show this wall texture here. So this was painted by me, and this is the actual imprint of Platt here on the wall space. I really wanted Platt to enter the space in another way. And I thought this would be a great way to draw attention to this little stand here. And people are able to scroll through this and view actual pages from the text. Um, with that, that completes my little walkthrough of the space. I will now move into a presentation that goes a little more into my behind the scenes process of building this show. Hi, everyone. Welcome to part 2, where I talk a little bit more about the behind the scenes process of It Comes from the Head. This exhibition opened in 2024, September 19th, and it will be open until February 10th, 2025. So this show has a short run in the NAGB schedule. And just for a little agenda about what I'll be running through today. So I'll walk you through the timeline, then I will go a little more detail into the process, and then Alex and I will open it up for a Q&A. So my timeline. So in 2019, I found Growing Functional Arts in the Bahamas in the National Archives. And that was really a complete accident. I've written about this before in preparation for the show as a part of my research process. But finding the book was a complete accident. I had been there to research something completely different. And I just happened to stumble across a display case, recognized my last name, was curious. I called my father after I saw his mother's name in the display case, and he got really excited because the book being made in 1968, he was a little kid when she was writing it. So he remembers it being made, but she unfortunately passed away when I was 8, so I didn't know her very well. And this book was really a way for me to reconnect to her, also for members of my family to really remember her and honor the work she's done. She created this book as a part of her thesis for a teacher's college program in the Bahamas. So she had no art historical training, but the book is really an in-depth analysis of craft and about the importance of craft in the fabric of society. In 2021, that is the um, that was the point where I started to apply for fellowships in relation to this research that I just happened to found, and where I really began to start thinking about it as research. And I'm realizing I jumped the gun a little bit here, but in 2023, 2022 to 2023, that's when I started planning and really structuring the show, but also restructuring because of a few changes that happened with the institutions I was working with at the time. And 2024 to 25 is when actually the curating and programming came into being. So I just wanted to give you a look at the space that I was working in. So this is a photo of the archives of the Bahamas, the National Archives of the Bahamas. This was the space that I was going into continuously from that point of 2019, really up until 2023, where I just put boundaries around my time in there. You are not able to take photos, and really you have to submit a photo request to receive digital copies of objects. Otherwise, all your research is done by photocopying the objects that you want to see. And how it works is that you check in at one of the little cubicles that you can see on the right, and someone comes and takes the sheet you filled out with all of your requests, and they go into the back room that you see staff only in that photo, no smoking, and they bring you out as much as they can find. But this process, considering their limited resources, the staff is overworked and underfunded. Not everything is listed, not everything is found in indexes. So you often have to return at different points throughout the year. So there was one year when I asked for photos, um, but received none. But when I returned, I not only received a copy of Growing Functional Arts in the Bahamas that was considered a sort of image, but I also was able to receive these archival photos um, after constantly returning to the space of the archive. So there's a lot for you to explore in that space. Unfortunately, it requires a lot of back and forth, but this time really allowed me to build relationships with the archivists. Something important for me to mention is this also happened during COVID. So there are limits on how many people can be in the space. Also, a lot of restrictions on time and place. There was a curfew there were several curfews in the Bahamas at the time of the pandemic up until 2021. And I was really trying to access these objects as much as I could at the time. I was split between Montreal. I was completing my BA at McGill at the time, but I was returning home for um, family reasons constantly, and I was going into this space. So next, I'll talk a little bit more about the writing and fellowships that made this research possible. So my first my first application to conduct this research was to a Bahamian organization. I wanted assistance for printing, but unfortunately, I was rejected. Um, People who know me will know that I'm very stubborn, and this ultimately motivated me to explore the research in other ways. I had at by the end of 2021, I had been going into the archives every day. So I was sharing my work with the people and artists that I was meeting while spending some time at home. And I was encouraged to really pursue this as a subject. And in one of those avenues was through a car. So I applied to write for the volume Salt for the Preservation of Diasporic Histories. It was published in fall 2022 and edited by Joanna Joachim and Pamela Edmonds, both respected curators. Joanna is an assistant professor at Concordia University. And I also was encouraged to apply for NLS Kingston, which is a Jamaica-based organization, but they sponsor art and scholarship all throughout the Caribbean. And I applied for their 2022 curatorial writing fellowship. That gave me not only the funding and space to conduct really more targeted research and to start thinking about what I was finding in the archives as a long-term project, but also more mentorship in terms of working in the Caribbean, working with Caribbean writers, working with people who had insights that I wasn't necessarily familiar with in terms of institutional spaces. There was a culture shock. I have been working with some of the people here today on projects through the curating and public scholarship lab at Concordia University, the student TTTM. But the culture shock was huge, turning now with my BA in art history and international development studies to that real-time work in my hometown. I also started to build a connection through NLS Kingston with the National Art Gallery of the Bahamas. So I was grateful to begin being in contact with their team of curators and staff. And later, as this project expanded to my Master's of Arts in Art History, I was also supported by UMass Amherst Department of Art History and Architecture. So planning and restructuring. From 2022 to 2023, things in the project shifted a little here. Just because after the pandemic, after I'd say about 2021, as we still continue to deal with COVID and be aware of those risks, a lot of things changed. I had received original dates for the opening of the show that had to be pushed back due to shuffling of staff at the NAGB, but also a reorganizing of resources in general. And that really kept this project in limbo for quite a while. I wasn't sure when the work would be made public, when I would exhibit, but I still remained dedicated to this project. It was still very important to me. And I ended up using the time to deepen my connections with artists and mentors who I had connected with during the fellowship with NLS Kingston. And they often invited me to work with them in new ways that really ended up deepening my research and deepening my relationship to this project. For example, I worked with Anina Major on her exhibition at Turn Gallery. I wrote for that, and that really created a space for me to think more deeply about diaspora and what straw work meant to contemporary art. By the end of 2023, I had a new date, and I was lucky enough to still be able to move forward with the show. You can see here the original flyer from the show and the opening. You can see Tanika, Nina, Jody, and Avria here on these flyers. Thank you, Blake, the design staff at the NAGB. And here you can see some of the installation process for the show. So this This space originally had housed the national exhibition that celebrated 50 years of Bahamian independence from Great Britain. And I really wanted to configure the space in a way that I felt allowed people to move slowly through the works and really give the space of contemplation to these artists who were dealing with women and people who I felt were already often overlooked. And you can just see some of the works here. So the space was filled with a number of works. This show features 10 artworks in total. I think the last configuration of the space had at least 50. Um, so it really was a change to the space. You can see here some of the photos of the installation process for Jody Minnis's work, Everybody's Business. And you can see one of the curators that I was lucky enough to work with, Ricardo Barrett. He is the NAGB's head curator, but also installation tech, conservationist, preservationist, and him along with Letitia Pratt were really my mentors in this process. They um, gave me insight into the structures of the NAGB, but also other art spaces in the Caribbean and in the Bahamas. Um, the exhibition emerged really as a collaboration with the artists. So this work that you saw in the space and that you can see the early stages of in these images really formed through continuous back and forth between Jody and I, but I also gave Jody the space to just work with Ricardo, who she's familiar with, and really create the work that she envisioned. Here you can see Anina Major with a mother in its early stages. And these images were a part of my request for the show, but also for the exhibition catalog, which will be published early next year. And I thought it was really important to include images that showed some of the process because I want people to be able to use the show and archives that come out of it as a learning tool and a tool to continue imagining ways to use things that are considered outdated or old or touristic or given arbitrary value to find new ways to configure them in contemporary art. And this image is just a picture of our opening. So I was lucky enough to open right before the start of my PhD program at Northwestern. And I was present for the opening. And I'm really grateful for the amount of people that came to view the show. I opened alongside Letitia Pratt Show, another curator here at the NAGB. And she curated A Small Remainder of Teeth, which is about eco horror and disaster. So the shows really complemented each other. We had an audience who was informed, who was interested in both of the subjects that we created shows about, which I'm really grateful for. And lastly, I will end my presentation with thank you for being here, but also for the support I've received since 2019, finding the book and where I am in this project now. So thank you very much. And Alex, I'll pass it off to you.
Hi. Thank you so much, Simone. Wow, that was so interesting. And I personally love seeing all of the behind the scenes photos and insights. So thank you for that. So what we're going to do now is, well, first of all, I'm going to change some of the permissions for you all because right now participants don't have the ability to unmute themselves. So you're all now unable to unmute yourselves. And we're going to move into a Q&A period. So this is going to work like most Zoom Q&A periods. You can either raise your hand or you can write your question in the chat. And I'm going to start us off with one question so everybody else has some time to start thinking about their own questions. And so the question I have for you, Simone, is I really feel like relationality is a core theme of this exhibition. I think you brought it up in pretty much every conversation about the artworks and also about the process. And so I'm wondering, how does your connection to the Bahamas, to straw craft through your grandmother, to the relationships that you've built with the artists, the archivists, the NAGB staff, like how does that all inform your curatorial approach when you're actually thinking of putting objects in space and how you want people to interact with them?
Um, so your question was about relationality and how does it inform my curatorial practice. I'd say, in terms of, I think I have a really clear idea of who my audience is that formed, I think, because the research for this project took so long, or at least it's the longest project I've ever done. Um, and having that idea of not who, but how I want people to engage with the work, I think is a real directive for my decisions as a curator. For example, when I look at Tuniga's work, I think about the people that she included in her creation of the work, Felicia Hunter, the figure who staged there, but also her connection and her research network, and the types of people who could possibly be interested in this work. And it helps me expand, I say, the audience that I feel like I would often consider when thinking about museum spaces. So, for example, this one, I think about tourists typically. But when tourists think when they enter this space, where here I'm thinking about people with an interest in history, people with an interest in heritage, people who want to see themselves in this artwork. And I feel like that um, entered into the way that I think about the labels, thought about what to display, how to display it, think about people wanting to know more, I'd say in general.
Thank you.
Thank
Um,
you.
of course. So I'm going to move. I see there's a question in the chat, and I just want to prompt everyone else if you have questions, please don't be shy. But our first question is coming from Barry, who says, "Thank you. A question. Has there been a resurgence of interest in this craft and others by youth?"
So often in, I'd say, broader society, there are a number of people who would say no. There isn't a resurgence of interest in this craft. I think that's why the advocacy is so strong in my grandmother's text, but also by others in the so a part that I didn't speak about was in terms of the programming in relation to the show, was a series of classes offered by held on premises for people to actually learn how to straw plat. Otherwise, um, people were not, I wouldn't say young people are interested in it per se. I'm sure there are young people interested in it, but the narrative in general around Shawcraft is um, this craft is being lost. People are dying with the knowledge. Um, that is in part why the book, finding the book was so amazing because it was someone years and years ago actively trying to preserve this cultural memory and a person really coming with the same questions now, the same issues now, and really thinking about how we've changed since then has been um, productive for me. I hope it's productive for others as well. I hope that this exhibition is a space where people can be encouraged to pursue the craft.
Thanks so much. We have two more questions in the chat. They're both a bit lengthy, so just give me a second. I'll try to read through them. You can also, I guess, read along, Simone. How does tourism in the Bahamas affect the way? Oh, sorry, I should mention. This is from Natalie Willis. So, how does tourism in the Bahamas affect the way you've approached the curation of straw work there? I'm thinking about this in regards to the fact that straw work has been so wrapped up in tourism, the straw market, for so long. And another question. Can you speak a little to, oh, sorry, everything's moving, to the connections the artists have to straw work in regards to their family history? If you haven't already, I missed a bit at the beginning. Apologies.
Yes. Thank you, Natalie. Hi, Natalie. Natalie is an amazing curator who's curated at the NAGB. Please go check out her work. Um, Tourism in Bahamas affect the way that you approach creative stuff with there. So the when I thought about tourism, when I thought about tourism in relationship to the show, I really wanted to avoid stereotypes um, associated with straw work. And I think that was a major way. Often vendors are often at risk in terms of engagement with um, who straw vendors as people who are on the front lines of tourism are at of a risk of being stereotyped because they often have to play to the capitalistic systems that really underlie our economy, and a lot of that is rooted in service. So I wanted to move away from that when creating the show. I think when thinking about this question, Natalie, I think about what Simone Lee says about labor and invisible labor, and how her audience her audience and focus and inspiration is Black women, and being and really bringing the processes of their labor, the evidence of their labor, the fruits of their labor to light. So that is definitely something I am inspired by, and something that I think was a counterpoint for me thinking about tourism. Um, Speaking to the connection the artists had to draw work in regards to their family history. Yes, I touched on Avria's, whose work as I look at it in the distance. So Avery is directly connecting to her family history. She's casting the faces of matriarchs in her family. She's touching on her experience working in the straw market as a child. She is literally deifying them in these portraits, in these works that really show their invention and the aesthetic foundation that she has been able to build on in her practice that comes from the women. Um, that's Averia, but Jody Minnis is also um, thinking about the members in her family who are straw vendors, straw platters. Jody has members in her family that work the market, are on that line that I continue to talk about. But they really carry the brunt of the millions and millions of tourists that we continue to praise and that we're so grateful for, who's taking care of them, who how are what does their spiritual life look like? Where is the meaning that they find in that engagement? Thinking about Anina, Anina also has members in her family that practice straw craft. She has a grandmother and I believe other matriarchs in her family. And I think that's really referenced in the title of her sculptural work, Mother, from 2023. There, she's kind of getting at like a sort of, I don't want to say innate, but almost, um, let's use the word maternal feeling that her sculptures create. She's gesturing towards the vessel. She's as an organic form, as something to be emptied, and the role of the mother as someone who passes down the practice of straw craft. Recently, I there was a talk held in this space just this week where we talked about what it means to learn straw plaiting in the traditional sense, where your mom, while minding the children, while doing whatever needs to be done in the domestic space, is plaiting as a means to provide income for the family. So a lot of Bahamians learned plaiting in that space. Um, and thinking about Tamika Galanis's connection to the Hunter Plantation. So she not only is depicting a descendant from the Hunter Plantation, but she herself is also connected to the enslaved people like Charlotte, shown in her I Named Charlotte series. Um, she is connected to that fountain of knowledge now overtaking the ruin of Fort Hope. So that was my long answer to your question. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you for the questions I've received so far. Um,
Yeah, thanks so much, Natalie. I really appreciate that. Okay, so I'll move on to Monica's question. Monica Patterson, who's actually one of the core members of Thinking Through the Museum. Hi, Monica. Thanks for joining us. So Monica says, I'm wondering about the broader museological landscape in the Bahamas and the Caribbean and how it compares to the broader landscape you know about through TTTM in Canada and in the world. I'm especially interested in the resonances and the differences around decolonizing approaches.
Thank you for bringing up um, the broader connections, Monica. In the Caribbean, so this exhibition focuses on straw plaiting in the Bahamas, but throughout my fellowship with NLS, I was able to also explore straw plaiting practices in the Caribbean briefly. But um, I wouldn't say I would say that it takes different forms. So I looked at artists who were creating installations in the Caribbean. There's one artist in Puerto Rico who creates entire installations of the raw material of straw plaiting and then uses the material collected from these installations to create furniture that eventually become part of the museum space. And when you compare works like this to other works, there's a strong practice in Jamaica of textile work related to straw. I'm at this fellowship, this exhibition is just one facet of MLS's broader network, but they have invested in artists who are also working with vernacular textile practices. So there's that as well. And when I was working on the article for Ricard, one of my main sources of inspiration was textile practices in Canada. Um, I, in terms of exhibiting, I can't necessarily speak to that in Canada, but I think there is extreme resonance in the desire to make work that has been invisibilized visible. And I feel like when we think about the word decolonization, being practices that are so connected to the land and that are used as histories of the land are really useful when working towards the broader goal of decolonization, which is taking the land back. But thinking about practices that just make us aware of our connections to the land and the boundaries and the ways that we are separated, I think is very useful. Monica, that was a sort of answer to your question. Thank you.
Thanks for that really thoughtful answer, Simone. We don't have any other questions now, but this is an opportunity. If you have a question, we'll wait a minute or two. If anyone wants to type something in the chat, again, you can also raise your hand and turn your video on if you want to ask a question directly. Don't be shy.
Oh, maybe I'll just ask this as I'm thinking of it, if that's okay. So Simone, thank you so much for this. I was thinking about a lot of the um, resonances of your exhibition with different kinds of sites. And so I was hearing you talk about things that really connect closely to community and family history. Obviously, you're in an art gallery, but you're also bringing in a sense of history, and you're doing some work historicizing these different practices. There was a question also about the connection to the tourism sector. So I feel like this is such a rich place to look and a really rich set of materials that you're thinking about. So I was wondering if you had some thoughts on museum genre. So, if you had done this exhibition in a historical museum or in a community center, how would it be different, or is that an interesting way for you to think about the different angles that you're bringing in your own sort of approach, and perhaps maybe with an eye toward future work, if you see this having other iterations or this exhibition coming out in different ways or developments?
Yes. The question, Monica. So the choice of the museum space was actually a big deal when I was, especially when I was thinking this over with my NLS mentors. Um, the museum space in the Bahamas at the time that I was even conceiving of the show was very limited. So there are a few spaces that are open to the public, but not many with as many steady hours. So that practical factor was a big part of choosing or of proposing the show to the National Art Gallery of the Bahamas, just so that people can actually come in and see it. This gallery is the gallery with the most foot traffic, located downtown, so tourists are able to easily access the space by foot, but also it's in the middle of the commerce space for the capital, so people are constantly moving by it. If I find that this space just gets a lot of traffic. There are also private spaces, and I didn't want to have this show in a private space because of the nature of the work. The nature of the work, I feel like, just calls to be made public. I'm moving away from continuing to make those practices that are sidelined even more sidelined, or creating more areas to access. I'm also I did not have the show at a library or a community center because my grandmother writes about how she visited actual works about exhibitions about straw work at libraries, at community centers, but that archival record is lost. And I feel like there are benefits to having a show in this space. Unfortunately, I would love, unfortunately, some of our spaces are just underfunded and not preserved in the ways that they need to be. I would love for a library or community center to be able to host a space, but it wasn't feasible at the time. I hope it is in the future. I'm also interested in the tension that occurs between considering straw craft as something that's vernacular that's moving into the fine arts contemporary space. And I wonder what happens. I, I've been wondering how this work is received, what changes, what does that do for the market? What does it do anything? What does it do for these artists to change the environment that this work is being exhibited? And that some of the pieces more easily could have been shown in the center of the straw market, but what does the reception of these different spaces, even though they're less than a mile apart, mean? Um, so thinking about this was important for me having the show interviewing.
Thanks so much. I don't see any other questions in the chat. This is everyone's last chance. I'm giving you one more try. We definitely have like maybe 3, 4 more minutes. So if anyone has anything, otherwise we can transition. I guess I'll just pass the mic one more time to Simone just to kind of say a little outro, and then we'll pass it back to me and I'll close us out for the day.
I just briefly, I wanted to thank everyone for being here. This likely will be the last few events of It Comes from the Head, and I'm just really grateful for your attendance. Yes, and I'm so happy to have this event with TTTM. This being a hybrid event means a lot to me because it means that the exhibition can be seen by that many more people. So thank you so much.